Recognizing the member for Kamloops North Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm glad to rise today and speak to increased taxation in the province of British Columbia. And I think it's important for people at home to realize that since 2017, British Columbians have faced 32 new or increased taxes in British Columbia, which has added $22 billion a year to the overall taxation that we all pay here within British Columbia. Now, as I was preparing for my comments today, I was going back and forth on my phone to look up a few documents over the weekend, and my screensaver on my phone is actually a picture of my two granddaughters sitting on the sofa together. Now, both of them will be turning 2 over the next couple of months, and both of them right now have no idea at all, obviously, at the future liabilities of this type of spending and taxation that is being put on their shoulders years down the road. And I know we all come to this place and say we're talking and run and are worried about our future generations. But when you see 32 increased and new taxes piled on in the space of a few years, when you see $22 billion added to the overall tax bill, and we have to keep in mind that's at a starting point of around a $30 billion tax bill back in 2017, which is now closer to $52 billion. That's the level of taxation that we have seen increase over the last few years. That is a level of taxation that simply is not sustainable for everyday British Columbians. Now, I know we always hear about how BC is working to make life more affordable for British Columbians, but the simple reality is that simply is not the case, household by household by household. We're in a situation as a province where we have the most unaffordable housing in British Columbia, largely driven by taxation. We have the most expensive gas in Canada and North America, largely driven by the highest gas prices or gas taxes in North America. We have ever-climbing costs on our home heating bills, largely driven by ever-increasing carbon taxation, despite essentially Atlantic Canada now being exempt from paying carbon tax for the next 3 years on their home heating oil. What we need is to be pushing back against this ever-increasing level of taxation, because when you have over half of the population of British Columbia $200 or less every single month from being able to meet their household bills, they simply can't withstand anymore. Now, those residents weren't fortunate enough to get retroactive 10% pay raises like the Cabinet voted themselves in a couple of years ago to cover off the bills. These households are working 2-3 jobs just trying to make ends meet. And instead of getting real and meaningful support, they see $22 billion added to the tax bill. The bottom line, Madam Chair, is when people go to pay a bill, they need the money in the bank account. They don't need to hear about some program that may or may not actually help, that may or may not actually be qualified for based on applying to some other level of government, essentially through filing your federal income tax return, and then waiting for a quarterly payment that may or may not show up in your bank account. And certainly the vast majority of people that are struggling right now actually are at an income threshold that does not qualify them for most of these programs. And that's the fundamental problem. The hard-working middle class in British Columbia has been left behind. We need to see programs in a way that people actually get the help. And one big way would be to not continually be adding to the tax burden for these residents and these households. In fact, it's so bad now that the latest government form of housing that needs subsidization for rents, you qualify if you have a household income of $190,000. That's how expensive housing has become, that the government has had to acknowledge that you have to actually earn $190,000 a year and you will still get help with your rent. That's simply not sustainable. And so when we look at the overall tax bill and we look at those 32 new and increased taxes, When you hear talk about we got rid of MSP, there was no getting rid of MSP. It was renamed and reallocated to different people. It was called the Employer's Health Tax, and it collects way more now than it did when it was MSP. That's a tax shift and a tax increase by any measure. And that is the problem, Madam Chair. When you look at the $22 billion extra yearly in taxation being brought in, despite record deficits, I might add, it does make one wonder where the heck all the money is going. And we don't have time today to get into how this government might want to redistribute and questionable ways that that's getting handled right now. It's in the news. But the genuine concern out there for people around taxation is the lack of sustainability for it. People understand that they need to pay for services. People understand that their taxes help fund those. But when you see the overall tax draw, the percentage going to education, despite record enrollment in K-12, actually dropping, and you see our numeracy results and our literacy results dropping in K-12, the result simply is not matching the excess taxation. And that's ultimately what people want to be able to see when they see $22 billion extra being drawn out of their paychecks. They want to see actual better results, not worsening results. So I look forward to hearing what the members opposite have to say for their 5 minutes, and I'll certainly have more to add for my 3-minute rebuttal at the end of this. Thank you, Madam Chair.